So, welcome everybody. I'd like to acknowledge Craig Connelly, the CEO of the Ian Potter Foundation. And the Ian Potter Foundation oversees the operations of the George Alexander Foundation. Did I get that right, Craig? Are you actually the CEO of the George Alexander Foundation?
I'm CEO of both.
You're CEO of both? Oh, congratulations. Sounds like a big job. So, this foundation, of course, was established in 1972, and I really love its vision, which is to create a vibrant, healthy, fair, and sustainable Australia. And how you do that really is through education and young people, and people who are there to make a difference in years to come. When I look at that mission, it really aptly, I think, exemplifies the life work of another special guest here today, Professor Fiona Stanley AC, and you're here with a particular hat on, which is that you are on the Potter Foundation Board of Governors. But of course we know Professor Stanley, you don't need any introduction at all, but Professor Stanley, just the young students here you may not know, there is a hospital across the road called the Fiona Stanley Hospital, and that has been named after Professor Stanley. And also she has spent her whole career researching and working with major childhood illnesses. So very honored to have you here. And also just to let people know that Professor Stanley is also a patron of Nankyera, which is our newly established research centre for Aboriginal health and social equity. I'm very delighted about that. Now, the Ian Potter Foundation, I'll just share you a little bit about the foundation. I'm sure Craig will say much more than I'm able to say. Is partnering about 12 universities across Australia. But I understand that Murdoch University is the only one in the West. So that's a real privilege, and we've been partnering since 2008. And the foundation has made it possible for over 60 students to come to Murdoch and complete their studies and educational programs. And it's not always very nice to talk about dollars, but just to put a little value for dollar value to that, it's about over $1.5 million that the foundation has supported the students here to succeed. Now, the story of the George Alexander Foundation, the founder, is a remarkable one, and I thought it might be just useful to remind ourselves the sort of challenges and hurdles that George Alexander himself had and overcame. And just very briefly, he was a very bright student in England, born in Hampshire, but his family could not afford the cost of undertaking a mechanical apprenticeship for him. So he couldn't go into education. And he left school at age 13, and then at age 15 he migrated alone to Australia. And he later then pursued his education through night school. And then through that he became a teacher of mechanics, aspiring mechanics, and then he went to manage a factory during the war and so on. And after 1945, he used his incredible skills to become an entrepreneur in a way. And he had various successful consumer products that he put into market, including Australia's leading garden irrigation supplier. So the story of this self-made man who successfully worked through education, had persistence, and was an innovator is actually what really resonates with Murdoch University, but universities in general. Because what are we about? We are about opportunity, perseverance, education changing people's lives, and also this kind of innovative, free-thinking mindset. So, you know, George Alexander resonates very closely with what Murdoch University is about, but more broadly what universities are about. Now, the GAF scholarships are awarded each year, and they are given to those who have, of course, appropriate academic ability, but also have community and leadership skills and potential. And the $24,000 is significant. It really does make a difference over 3 to 4 years, and the sorts of things that students are able to do as a consequence is concentrate on their education, because their living expenses, accommodation, and other things can be catered through that scholarship. And I just wanted to say that the scholarship is very powerful, and it really does transform our students' lives. But I'd like to say something a bit broader than that. They are often also a catalyst for transformation of whole families and communities. And so the students themselves are able to sometimes support their families as a consequence of the scholarships and study as a consequence. Single parents, for instance, will find it particularly hard. But also they're able to inspire future generations to go on their footsteps. Particularly if you're a first generation. I'm a first generation in my family that went to university. There's nobody that truly inspires you because your family is not able to do it. Once you're in university, and like my daughter is now second generation, it's a very different journey. There's a different aspiration, and there's different self-belief as a consequence of me going to university that then inspired my daughter and the generations to come. So scholarships are life-changing, not just for the students, but also whole communities. And I really want to emphasize that. And we have lots of perfect examples here today, all of you, but we also have Elise Bowen, who is going to speak in a moment. And she received one of these scholarships in 2008, studied animal science, and her passion is sheep, and she has been recognized as a young leader in her field. For instance, she has been awarded a Sheep Industry Business Scholarship by the Western Australian State Government. So can you see how there's lots of different paths that are enabled through the scholarship? So congratulations, Elise. Right, so in closing, what I'd like to say is that absolutely delighted you're all here today. What an amazing privilege for me as a Vice-Chancellor to lead a university that has, first of all of you in it, but also have this close relationship with the foundation. We are entirely aligned what we are trying to achieve through our joint endeavours. I'm very, very grateful for that. So now it's my great pleasure to invite and first introduce Craig Connelly, the Chief Executive Officer of the Ian Potter Foundation and George Alexander Foundation. He is going to say a few words, and Craig was started as the CEO in 2015, but before that he had a very distinguished career in financial services sector. He's also an entrepreneur, and he established in 2004 his own Australian equities fund. And in preparing to introduce Craig, I understand that Craig's had also his personal challenges, including some challenges relating to health, and that's a great inspiration, I think, and it brings a different understanding when one is running a foundation that you're running. So please join me in welcoming Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava, and good morning, everybody. Can I just acknowledge Vice-Chancellor Professor Ava Lainanen for her kind words and also attendance here today, as well as Provost Professor Romy Lawson and Director of Advancement Robin Sharp, who are attending today. Thank you all for coming. And special mention not only to the students that are here, and I think most of you are current scholars, either first, second or third year scholars, wearing those lovely red t-shirts. Thank you all for attending. But today wouldn't happen without the efforts of both Clara Millett and Kelly Rees. I think Clara and Kelly, the effort you go to actually put this event on, to have my team fly out from Melbourne to gather together all of the scholars and some alumni, and then to hear from someone like Elise and also from Fiona, I think is a real privilege. And just to be able to acknowledge, one, your success in being awarded scholarships is outstanding, but two, for you to start to understand the opportunity that might be presented to you as a result of securing that scholarship, it just starts to sink in. When you're 18, 19, 20, you may realise, you may not realise. When you're 25 to 30, you start to really realise the life-changing impact that a scholarship like this can have for you. So congratulations on being awarded the scholarships, and thanks for coming. when we were thinking about the focus of today's presentation, we spoke about it back at Potter, and we thought we'd like to reflect on the different paths you can take professionally over your journey as a professional. And as Ava mentioned, I ran an Aussie long-short equities fund from 2004 to 2012. I was a partner at an investment bank prior to that for 12 years. A long career in financial services, and now I'm CEO of a philanthropic foundation. I started as a chartered accountant, and when I was at Wears and then Goldman's, I was an equity analyst, I was head of research, I was on the global management committee for risk. I then ran my own hedge fund, as I said, and became a fundraiser, raising funds from people to invest their money, managed that through the global financial crisis. And so I've had a lot of different careers on a professional journey that I didn't anticipate when I first started my business degree back in the 80s, a long time ago. And I think I've done that through what is a relatively stable, professional workplace environment, predominantly financial services. I think younger people today, and I've got 3 kids, 27, 25 and 23, all university graduates. I am also a first generation uni attendee, so my kids are second year. And I know them, just like you, I think will face greater challenges and greater opportunities as well, because you'll have a myriad of different professional pathways in front of you. I think you'll face greater technological challenges and greater challenges as a result of the development of AI in particular. And so as a result, at different times on your journey, your life journey, you'll be required to make decisions which at the time will feel very risky. And so we just thought it would be great to hear from Fiona. Fiona is an eminent Australian and a former recipient of the Australian of the Year Award, who I know took risks in her career, and she'll share that story with you. And then Elise, I think, is a younger and modern day example similar to Fiona, who has also taken risks, I think, and is now living in Wagga Wagga, for example, and she's a Perth resident, or West Australian resident, I should say, clearly. And so I think their 2 stories are relevant for all of you to hear and just dwell on. So without any further ado, and in thanking you again all for coming, I'm handing over, I believe, to Elise Bowen to share some words with us. Thanks, Elise.
Thanks very much, Craig. The sort of topic of my talk is taking risks and embracing uncertainty, and it was sort of directed at in the professional world, but a lot of my experience is also personal as well, and I want to share that with you because I think we probably have a lot of similar interests, and you're probably going to face some similar challenges to what I have in the past few years, so you might be able to take something from that. So firstly, I really wanted to say thank you to the George Alexander Foundation for, firstly, obviously my scholarship, but secondly, this opportunity to come and present to you today. It's really quite humbling to, as a young person, be asked to speak at an event like this and realise that you have a voice that people want to hear and a story that people want to hear about. So that's really nice. And I was a scholarship recipient, obviously, from 2008 through to 2010, and I completed my degree in 2011. I had to relocate to attend university. My family are on a farm in York, and they couldn't financially support me to do that. So the scholarship really enabled me to not have to seek employment to pay for my accommodation, which was a major thing because I could really focus on my studies. And at the time, I probably didn't realise how that would contribute to my academic success, and subsequently watching my younger siblings going through and not having a scholarship and having to work a couple of casual jobs, and they're much brighter than me on the TER rank, and they are struggling through university. So that's really made me realise that much of my academic success is actually down to this opportunity. So congratulations for applying for it, and congratulations for achieving the scholarship, and really make the most of it. So a little bit about me and my path since graduation. How did I get from York, WA to Wagga Wagga in New South Wales? So I grew up on a family farm in York, which is 80 kilometres east of Perth. I've always been a farm girl, and more than a little sheep crazy. I'm assuming there's quite a few farming kids in the crowd. Do you want to raise your hand if you're from a farm? A few? So you're all from rural WA? Just country towns, not necessarily farms? Yeah, so York is quite close by. I'm really lucky. I'm sure a fair few of you wouldn't be able to duck home on weekends. I studied animal science at Murdoch, and I really didn't want to leave the farm. Going to uni was a really big thing for me. It was very scary. And since graduating, my life has taken many twists and turns. I never imagined 5 years ago that I would be standing where I am now, having done the things that I've done in the last 5 years. I've surprised myself and everyone around me. Now I'm based in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, where I run my own business called Sheep Data Management. And I've recently commenced a PhD with Murdoch University, with their sheep research team, but I'm sort of a bit remote from the team, being based at Charles Sturt University in New South Wales. So for my talk, I've decided to talk about 5 key themes, which I think are related to the topic, and I think I can really share my experience around those topics with you. So the first one will be taking risks, and just some of the risks that I've taken to get to where I am, adapting to change, dealing with stress, which is really important, building resilience, and also personal growth. So for the first one, which is taking risks, you might not know it looking at me here today, but I used to be really shy, a total homebody. I didn't want to stand out from the crowd or be a leader. I think if my parents hadn't forced me to fill out the scholarship application, I wouldn't have done it. I never wanted to go to uni, to be honest. I wanted to stay at home on the farm. I was really out of my comfort zone moving to Perth, and I did go home most weekends. Unfortunately, when I was growing up on the farm, it was always drilled into me, you're never going to be able to come home and take over the farm. None of you kids are. You've all got to go off and make your own path in the world. And that was a really hard thing to accept, and it did take me probably a long time to accept it, and that I had to go off and make my own way in the world. And Mum and Dad did say to me, look, if you go to university, you can come home to the farm on the weekends and the school holidays, the university breaks rather. So I thought, okay, righto, well, I better just go and do that then. And basically completed university, and I still just really wanted to be somewhere else. And I came to this sort of point post-graduation and I got a job and was living in Perth, and I was sort of really dissatisfied and a little bit sad, and I thought, what I really want to do, I really can't do that. And I actually made a big life-changing decision to either, well, I can stay here and just continue to be a bit dissatisfied, or I'm going to make a big change. And that's when I took my first big risk, and I actually went travelling by myself overseas for 10 months at the age of, I think I was 23 maybe, 22, 23, and I'd previously didn't have the confidence to catch a bus in Perth by myself. So it was quite a huge thing to do, and it was almost out of anger, and I just went and did it, and I got to Heathrow in London and I thought, oh my goodness, what do I do now? So that was the first big risk, and it was such a great learning experience. And subsequently coming back from overseas, I then found myself in Perth again thinking, oh, I'm back in this situation again where I want to be home and I can't. And York is so close to Perth that I constantly get drawn home to the farm and just get my heart broken a little bit. So I thought, nope, you know what? The world is a big place, and I'm going to go pretty much as far away as I can while still being in the same country. So I moved to Queensland, and I lived there for 18 months. I tried lots of new and random things, basically pretended I didn't have a degree, and I thought, I'm going to work out if this is really what I want to do or if there are other things out there for me. So I did random things, I met people, and I really learnt to cope and thrive on my own. In 2016, I decided to try and make my business, which was a little thing on the side, my main source of income, and I had to be a bit strategic. So I decided I was going to move to Wagga, which is a real sheep-focused town, and it's a big city actually. And then in 2018, I commenced a PhD via distance, so that's another risk. I'm studying quite remotely from the rest of my research team with a business on the side. So there's a bit of an indication, I suppose, there of the risks that I've taken. So adapting to change is the next theme. So I've actually always found change quite a hard thing to deal with, and I've sort of longed, growing up, I've longed for things to go back to how they used to be. I found it really hard to accept that we're never actually going to go, the 6 of us, on a family holiday anymore. I find that really quite sad, and I come home to visit and just things aren't the same. So I've sort of found it really hard to adapt to change. However, I've realised that in reality, life is always changing, and it's your ability to adapt to change that's going to influence primarily your stress and how you cope with life and how happy you are. Because if you if you don't embrace change and you resist it, you just don't really have much control over your future and your happiness. I've found that travelling by myself was a great experience, and it was an experience that made me really develop some independence, a lot of confidence, and being quite adaptable and learning to cope with changes quite quickly. And I've learnt that change can often be for the better. You get lots of new opportunities and also a lot of personal growth. So these are a few photos from my European adventure.
Still involving sheep?
Yes. For about half the time I volunteered on different farms and with different families, and the other half of the time I was doing the backpacking thing in the major cities. So you can see that I'm sort of pursuing my interests, and being with sort of like-minded people and learning a lot. But it was still very stressful having to work out how to get around and going to countries where English wasn't the primary language and you had different currencies and all those sorts of things. The third topic I wanted to talk about was dealing with stress, and this is something that I've got a lot of recent experience with that I'd like to share a bit about. So basically, stress is the way that your body is reacting to events or conditions in your environment that are often out of your control, and that's when something is demanded of you and you have to act, essentially. So stress is a normal part of life, and it's not a bad thing. It's how you react to the stresses, though, that can determine the outcome, and particularly with regards to mental health. Over the last 6 months I've been going through a bit of a mental health battle, and I am on medication and receiving counselling for depression. It's something that is in my family, and I was always quite aware of it, and we always talk about it openly. So I'd been sort of through quite a stressful, like dealing with a lot of major changes in my life in the last 12 months. I started a new relationship, and I started a PhD, and I went travelling, and the relationship started to fall apart, and there were lots of things happening, and basically I thought everything's not okay here. I need to sort of start talking about this problem and work out what's going on. So I sought help pretty much as soon as I felt that something wasn't right, and I just wanted to really impart on you that don't be afraid to talk to people and seek help when you feel a bit overwhelmed with life. The old saying, a problem shared is a problem halved, and keeping things to yourself isn't helpful, and it's not healthy either. Talk about things that are worrying you, ask people for help and advice, and in my experience, every person that I've opened up to, you actually realise that a lot of people have gone through a similar thing in their life and have a story to share, and it just really makes you feel that you're not alone, and what you're going through is actually quite normal. I think our generation, we do have a huge problem with mental health, and we're going to be faced with so many stresses, all the technology and not switching off and all these sort of things that you're constantly on the go and constantly in contact with people, and when you get these sort of feel like there's some kind of depression or anxiety happening, it's really, for me, it was a sign that I needed to make some changes in my life. I couldn't continue to keep going as I was, or I would just get burnt out. Some of those things were making a lot of personal changes, but also routines with balancing study, work-life balance, those sort of things. So I hope it feels to me like I had the courage to make some drastic changes. I've really shook up my work routine. I've moved to be on campus at university doing my study and my business from there. I've joined a gym, so I've really tried to look after myself, and had a bit of a change to my living situation and things like that. So it's very important to find balance in your life between health, work and leisure. For me, I realised that I'd forsaken a lot of me time, and I neglected the things that made me happy. Friends and family time, it's really important to maintain those relationships, because they're the ones that you really depend on when you're going through the hard times. And it's important to cherish them during the happy times as well, and really just take a step back and realise what life's all about. And in terms of your health also, don't neglect yourself. Exercise, eat well, get enough sleep. So that's what I focus on day to day. Few snaps from my business here. So the next topic I wanted to talk about is building resilience. So resilience is essentially your ability to cope with those stresses in life and recover quickly or more quickly from difficult situations. And my resilience has been seriously tested several times over the last 5 years. Having a strong network of family and friends is critical. To to lean on for advice and support. Living away from my family, I found that I had to find substitute people to fill roles such as parents, aunts, uncles, those sort of things. And I have Wagga parents, and I have New South Wales parents, and I have all my Queensland aunties. And for me, they're really important people because I don't have that network of blood family that I can lean on for advice and support. Professionally, it's also really important to create strong networks. As a young professional in agriculture, I've reached out to and been embraced in return by a lot of established professionals in the industry. And it's a hard thing to do when you are starting out as a young person and you think, I don't know much, and these people are so experienced and they're going to look at me and think, what does this kid know? But in reality, they just really love young people who are enthusiastic and passionate, and they're just a person like you are. And I've been really warmly received, and I am so thankful for that I've had such a great experience. And in establishing my business, I have this network now of people that I can go to and ask some questions like, how do you charge for travel? Things like this, I have no idea. Get a bit of advice on business type things. In my business, creating all these networks has allowed me many different opportunities to collaborate with others, and also being referred on to potential clients, which is really great. Another important thing for me in terms of being resilient was having a backup plan in place for a bit of peace of mind. So starting my own business was a big risk, and I didn't have alternate employment at the time. When I moved from Queensland to Wagga, I thought I've really got to have a bit of a safety net here. So I sent my CV through to some people on the CSU research and lecturing list, and I just said, look, I'm moving to Wagga, this is my background, I'm really interested in opportunities for casual employment, and for me that was a bit of a backup plan. So that piece of paperwork is really important. And I was subsequently able to gain some casual employment at CSU and some experience in teaching, as well as involvement in research. Now this little bit's about personal growth. What's that? Since I took that first big risk and leap of faith travelling overseas alone, I feel like I've totally changed as a person. I've really surprised myself, and I think I've surprised my friends and my family as well. They never thought that I'd be the type of person just set off across the Nullarbor in my little hatchback with all my belongings. And I left in October, and I remember Mum saying, so you'll be home for Christmas, won't you? And I said, no Mum, I'm moving. So I'm much more comfortable in making myself uncomfortable. And you've got to remember that putting yourself out of your comfort zone is actually necessary for personal growth. If you always do what you've always done, you're never going to get anywhere other than where you've always been. And it is a really hard thing. I used to shy away from those situations where I would feel uncomfortable, like what I'm doing right now. Strangely, I'm getting more used to doing this sort of thing, making myself feel a bit uncomfortable. I've tried many different things, from doing a barista course and working in a fruit shop up in Queensland, to joining a gym and becoming a member of Inner Wheel, a voluntary women's service organisation. More relative to agriculture, I joined New South Wales Young Farmers after I moved to Wagga and had experience on the goat and biosecurity committees. In 2016, I applied for the LambX Young Guns competition, which is a competition for young people at a major sheep industry event, and I subsequently completed the Sheep Producers Leadership Program in 2017. 2017 also saw me compete for the Trans-Tasman Xander McDonald Award, which took me to New Zealand for a finalist interview. So you can see how these things kind of snowball. From one opportunity arises another, and it's part of the networking and getting your name out there as someone who's willing to have a go. But it's also the confidence that you gain, and you think, oh, I can do this, I can do this, oh, I can do this, and all of a sudden you're doing all these crazy things. So it is a bit of a snowballing effect. In 2018, I was involved in the Merino Link Hour of Power, which was a little session at another big sheep industry conference, as well as getting involved with teaching at CSU and accompanying the CSU Merino Challenge team to compete in Adelaide. And more recently, obviously, I've commenced a PhD with Murdoch University, which will keep me busy for the next 3 years. And personal growth and development is something that's really important to me, and I think it's just really one stepping stone after another, and once I've ticked off the PhD, I don't know what will come next, but I'm really excited to just keep growing and learning. So I wanted to finish with a few key points of advice, or what I would consider hopefully some take-home messages from my experience. The first one, and it probably isn't practical for everyone, but for me, being in the situation where I was a single person, quite young, didn't have any commitments, I didn't have anything to tie me down, I was able to then say, righto, I'm dissatisfied and unhappy with where I am now. So my advice is, if you're in that position and you think, realistically, I don't have anything tying me down, don't be afraid to take risks. Uproot yourself, challenge yourself, go somewhere totally different if you can, because later on when you can't and you're restricted, you might regret it. Be open to opportunities. Say yes even if they make you feel uncomfortable. If they don't make you feel uncomfortable, it's probably not an opportunity for growth. Apply for things, absolutely apply for things. You've obviously already done that to apply for this scholarship, so keep that momentum going. Don't assume you won't be successful. Take the time to apply, you never know what the outcome might be. And also, being involved in extracurricular activities looks great on your resume. And it sort of really helps when you're applying for something and you go, I've been involved with this, this, this and this. They go, brilliant, I want this person to do my course. And the final one is have the courage to talk to professionals in the industry or in your industry. I've sort of really given this an agricultural spin because that's my background, but acknowledging that you're in different sectors. Have the courage to really talk to professionals. Just go up and introduce yourself and say, hi, my name's whatever, and really interested in what you're doing, and I'm studying, and ask for opportunities for work experience and those sort of things. It's a really good stepping stone to get to know that person. These professionals often get a kick out of talking to young people who are engaged and interested in what they're doing. And this is my final slide, so thank you very much for your time. All the best with your studies. Come and have a chat with me later. And if you have any questions, throw them up.
I thought that was an outstanding presentation, and I know you said beforehand you were nervous about doing it, and clearly still somewhat out of your comfort zone. So as a 29-odd-year-old young woman who doesn't present much, my feedback to you is your presentation skills are outstanding.
Thank you.
And I think the relevance of your topic would have really resonated with the young people here today. And on a personal level, with a 27, 25 and 23-year-old, I've just asked Mairead for a copy of the video because I'm going to email it to each of them. Because my son's trying to work out whether to travel to New York at the moment or not, and he's 25 with no ties. It's sort of like, well listen to Elise and off you go. Absolutely. So it resonates on a lot of levels. I thought your presentation was outstanding. Congratulations on what you've achieved. And really, to the conversation we were having before, when I look at GAF scholars, when I look at the young people today, I get a little bit funny about people saying thank you, but I understand why they're saying thank you. But what I don't get funny about is seeing a GAF scholar 11 years on who is clearly just an outstanding example of the opportunities that flow from and the results that flow from the GAF Scholarship. So thanks for your time and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
I now have the task of introducing Fiona Stanley, and Fiona is a member of the Ian Potter Foundation board, and I must point out the Ian Potter Foundation and the George Alexander Foundation are run by the one organisation. Ian Potter Foundation has a pot of money, about $720 million or thereabouts. George Alexander Foundation has about $40 million. And what GAF does is GAF funds young people and assists them by awarding scholarships to study, generally rural and regional people that might not otherwise study. The Ian Potter Foundation, with over $700 million, funds $30 million a year supporting charities around the country. We fund solely in Australia, and we fund in a range of areas: medical research, health, disability, employment, the environment, the arts. And Professor Fiona Stanley, I know, was invited to join the board, primarily because, one, she is an incredibly intelligent and eminent Australian, but two, is somewhat expert in the medical field in particular. And we, as a foundation, are heavily reliant on the expertise of our board members to assist us in assessing whom we might award grants to. And so board members are very active, and as Fiona's learnt, I email her a lot, I ask her for assistance a lot, as do my staff as well, and her input is highly valued. Now, it's already been mentioned that the hospital just near us is named after Fiona. Fiona is also the founding director and patron of the Telethon Kids Institute, and also established ARACI, the Australian Research Alliance for Children and Youth, and was telling me yesterday when I was chatting with Fiona about today that one of the significant organisations that assisted her in establishing ARACI was actually through the Ian Potter Foundation, our chairman Charles Good. So the ties are deep and long. I'd like to thank Fiona for agreeing to speak today. Fiona is a generation or two apart from Elise, but another perfect example of someone who has taken risks over the course of her career, and I'm sure you'll enjoy her speech. Over to you, Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. I can't give anyone a hug on account of I've got a cold and I don't want to infect anyone, but I do want to hug Elise somehow like that. Thank you. And what you didn't say, and I was so impressed when I heard beforehand that the kind of business she's running is absolutely key to the future of how some of the agricultural industries around sheep are going to be. So it's looking at the genetic capacity, if you like, of herds. Who are your good producers, who are your not good producers? Dramatic differences between the ewes that do well and the ewes that are actually costing you money, and the rams, and how you get the rams with the best ewes to make the best animal husbandry, so you can have a good herd. I mean, what a great thing for a young person to do. I mean, it's blown my mind. So I think, you know, the ways in which you can use your innovative path with all your risks and uncertainties and the way you've conquered things is inspirational. And so I am extremely impressed with that. I just want to say one thing also about George Alexander before I go on and acknowledge Noongar Budja, and that is that, isn't it interesting that migrants, I mean, migrating at the age of 15 to Australia by himself all those years ago, but migrants are often the people who've got up to get up and go. They've got much more adventurous spirit. They're often stronger. So if you look at migrant populations, it's interesting in terms of our refugee debate at the moment, actually those people tend to be the ones that we'd really like to have here. And if you look at outcomes of people who have migrated to Australia, I mean, look at our Vice-Chancellor here. You know, they are outstanding people. So I also want to acknowledge that we're on Noongar Budja. And I always do that by not just saying how important it is to acknowledge that they were the traditional owners, the First Nations people of this country, but also to acknowledge why it's important we acknowledge it, which is because of the past injustices, the stolen generation and the massacres, and the kind of things that we see in Aboriginal populations today are a result of that history. And that's really important for us to understand that. I've researched it extensively with my Aboriginal colleagues. But it's a really exciting time for First Nations. There are so many great things happening. There are so many Aboriginal scholars. There are so many Aboriginal doctors and nurses and midwives. You've got an outstanding one here at Murdoch in Rhonda Press or Rhonda Marriott, who I've worked with for the last 15 years. So, but in terms of risk and uncertainty and making a difference, boy, the First Nations are going to go. If we give them a voice, if we give them a voice in the Constitution, there'll be no holding First Nations back. And that's why I've got to support that. So in any way that you can do that, as George Alexander Fellows, go forth and multiply, make films about it. I've been talking to some of them, the wonderful people who are going to marry the arts and sciences, and we need to do that. So I'm trying to think about how my career can be relevant to you, when really Elise's career is the one that's much more relevant to you. I'm old, I'm really old. I'm even older than Craig when he went to university in the 80s. I went to university in the 60s, which, you know, none of you are even sort of, I'm like your grandmother. But I will tell you about my career, and then you can take from it the kinds of things that you might find useful in terms of taking risks and how you deal with uncertainty and making a difference. But I've had a dream run. I've really had a dream run. When people say, when I say that to people, they say, but you had it tough too, and you conquered that. But I think I really did have, I had a very lucky career. But I can look back now and say that, can't I? I guess when I was going through it, I can remember it. I was so scared. You know, I came from a white academic privileged background. We weren't very wealthy, but my parents both been to university. One was a scientist, my father was a scientist, my mother was a classics scholar. There was no debate. I was going to go to university. It was absolutely. I was in an environment that nurtured intellectual development. So I was very, very lucky. We didn't have a lot of money, as I said. My dad was still a student when I was born, but, you know, there it was. So I went against my parents' wishes and enrolled in medicine. In those days, only 6 women in the whole course of nearly 80 or 90 men. I guess that was a risk, wasn't it? But anyway, the point is that I went against my parents' wishes. I mean, you know, you had a similar kind of thing of going along with your parents' wishes, but I thought I wanted to do medicine. And doing medicine then was tough for a girl, apparently. I actually found it was fine. And it wasn't so much the men that were all around me. It was this rather arrogant teachers. You know, one of the first things that were said to us on the day one of our medical course, you won't believe this. You are the cream of the cream. You are the top of the intellectual rank. Can you imagine saying that to a group of young students? You can understand why some doctors end up being arrogant, can't you? But what they should have said to us was, you are great that you've got into medicine. Question everything you do. Do not accept what your lecturers tell you. Do not be arrogant and be partners with your patients. Those are the kind of things they should have said. I hope they're the kind of things they say today, and I think it is. But you see how important it is to challenge that. So I think that that's what I've enjoyed doing most, is challenging and asking questions when it's so scary to ask a question. But sometimes you ask a question in a seminar or in a lecture and people say, oh gosh, thank goodness you asked that question, because I wanted to answer that too, but I was too scared. Why is it that we're scared to do that? We have to create the kind of environments in our education where you feel okay about asking questions, however stupid you think they might be, because often they're not stupid at all and they absolutely have to be clarified. So I went from this sort of course in medical school here in Western Australia and ended up working in public health and prevention and social justice. And it's that journey that I just want to quickly share with you. So medical school, yes, it was risky. I found it challenging, but I got a huge amount of knowledge. It was amazing. I love learning about the human body. I loved every single aspect. Every time we did obstetrics, I wanted to be an obstetrician. Did paediatrics, I wanted to be a paediatrician. We did, you know, not ear, nose and throat or dermatology. No. Every time we did dermatology, I just got itchy and scratchy. So, but almost everything I absolutely loved. And I think, you know, how lucky was I to be in a course where I was just so excited about learning about the human body. You must have had the same when learning about sheep. I mean, it's absolutely, when you've got something that fascinates you, honestly, things go really well. When I graduated in medicine, for some reason, I'm trying to work out now, I've got a big question, why did I take a risk? I went and worked with the Aboriginal Advancement Council in East Perth. This is before they had Aboriginal medical services here in WA. Now, I just don't know why I did that. What was it that made me go and visit the East Perth, where all of the often then drunk Aborigines were living in the Beaufort Street Park there? And I learnt a huge amount about Aboriginal circumstances by working for the Aboriginal Advancement Council, and I joined a group of other young doctors, on the whole, all male, and we went and visited every single Aboriginal community, mission, reserve, camp, because in those days there were missions, there were reserves, there were camps. They don't have them now so much, and in the all of rural WA, and found out what it was like to be Aboriginal in Western Australia. It shocked me. I was a little white privileged girl going and finding out the situations in which people are living. And I got hugely disillusioned about clinical medicine. I thought there's absolutely no way I can practice medicine and save lives when I could prevent disease. Because what would happen is we'd bring these kids in from remote communities like Connelly and Mount Margaret, these missions and places, and these kids were so ill from dehydration and from gastroenteritis and respiratory disease, and we'd put them in hospital, perform a medical miracle on them. I can even remember a newspaper article on a kid who came in looking absolutely dreadful and then went out a happy bouncing baby back into the community which caused the problem in the first place. And I thought to myself, probably I'm going to take a risk here. I don't want to be a doctor anymore. That's how That's how scared I was about where I was going. What was I going to do? I've done all these years of training and 2 years in hospital, 8 years of training, and I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And then I go off on my trip. I go off on my trip with a rucksack on my back, hitching. You wouldn't want to do this now. Don't do this now. It's too much of a risk. I did have a bloke by this stage who eventually married me, thank goodness. And we hitched across the world and ended up in London as well. And then I found that there was a thing called public health, social medicine, epidemiology, biostatistics. I found a way I could do medicine which was about finding out what the causes of disease were and preventing them. And all the lights went on. I thought, oh, I found it. Now, I was very scared. I was just knowing not what to do. What should I do? My parents were right. I shouldn't have gone into medicine. I should have done marine biology. Why did, etc. No. Suddenly, I realised that this amazing adventure that I had been on ended up. Now, how did I end up at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine? Again, why? How did that happen? Well, I saw a little advertisement in the Lancet, and in those days, this is the 1970s now in the UK, you might not believe this, a lot of the advertisements for medical people in the UK in the Lancet said, British male graduates need only apply. Whoa. Anyway, this one didn't say that. It said, for those interested in a career in social medicine. Now, I was doing a locum up in a remote Scottish island at that stage, trying to work out what I was going to do with my life. And I saw this ad and I thought, social medicine? I wonder what social medicine is. Gee, maybe I'll look at that. And I was scared again. Little typewriter, dear sir, I've just seen your advertisement for a career in social medicine. I don't have any qualifications except I did medicine and I work with Aboriginal people you signed yours, etc. Please come down for an interview. Oh my gosh. So off I go down for this interview. 8 as I found out later, they were the heavyweights. But I was nervous enough anyway. But there I was. And as soon as I entered that environment, I realised this was going to be my life. Everything started. The little motor then came on. I think when you probably hit Wagga Wagga and started doing that business, you realised there was a role that you were going to play, and it was going to be a great role for you. And I hope that continues, because you've really got it. And it certainly happened for me. I had no money. I was trying to live in London, and then suddenly I get a letter from someone here in Perth, and I want to get back to mentoring later. This is the first time anyone had ever mentored me. And I was actually 26 or 7 by this time. And the person said, oh, there's NHMRC are offering scholarships for training in clinical sciences and epidemiology. You might wish to apply. Whew, that saved me. I then had a scholarship, a bit like the George Alexander Foundation Scholarship, which meant that I could live in London and study for 2 years and do a thesis. I topped the course. I loved it. The whole thing, all the lights turned on. I then worked a little bit in the UK in public health. I went to the United States and got involved in perinatal and maternal and child health research at the top place in the States, the National Institutes of Health and the Centres for Disease Control. I made the most incredible network of people at that time. It was a great time to be in research, because so many people, there were so few people doing the research that I was doing, and there was enough money to go around for it, which was just fantastic. And I decided I would come back to Australia and set up in Western Australia the best data for maternal, child, youth health that I could. And it was just fantastic. I came back here, it was like a desert. We had absolutely almost no data, but the beginnings of a whole great lot of data sets, and that's what we did. We set up the best data now, some of the best data in the world, on births and developmental pathways for children and young people, which in enabling discoveries about how best to enhance child development and building, brain development, how to prevent birth defects, prevent disabilities, prevent the kind of conditions in Aboriginal kids that I was so anguished about as a young person. And what's more, trained up a whole lot of people who can then carry it on and do the work. So that was the next risk. After doing my research group here and setting them up, I decided that what I needed to do was not just public health, but to actually set up an institute that had genetics and molecular bioscience and clinical sciences, as well as epidemiology and population sciences. And people said in Western Australia, why do you want to do that? I thought, okay, we've got to take a bit of risk here, but let's do it. And we set up the Institute, as we called it then, of Child Health Research, with absolutely no money. And we got a building at the Children's Hospital in which we paid $1 a year for the building. So it was magic. There was magic. So we then got the money. Then Telethon came on board. If you all know about Telethon, probably. Without Telethon, we wouldn't have existed. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's now an enormous institute of about 700 people embedded in the Children's Hospital, and it's just doing fantastic work. We've already heard about, we set up a national organisation as well, which Ian Potter funded. But the whole point of all of this was we wanted to make a difference. Okay, we wanted to take the risks of setting up these things. We wanted to actually, make the most of the information that we had, but we wanted to make a difference. And that's the real message, I think, that you should take from today, is that you may think that you're a little cog in a wheel and that you might not have a lot to give, but being where you are now, and getting the knowledge that you are going to get, and over the course of your studies and what you do, you have a terrific opportunity to make a difference for good. And boy, do we need it in our society. We need you, Elise, to do the kinds of things you're doing. We need you guys to go out there and make a difference, to take those risks, to not be shy about it, and to realise that, yes, you can do it. And so now we've got the fantastic data sets, we've got a lot of research, we've got Nangira here with our incredible number of Aboriginal researchers. I think we've trained over something like 20 Aboriginal PhDs now from our institute. And so the messages are, take the risks. It's scary. Yes, and there's uncertainty. There's more uncertainty probably for you than for me, although I'm looking back now with the benefit of hindsight. It was huge uncertainty, actually, when I really do think about it. If I ever write my memoirs, I'll mention that it's uncertain. But now I can look back and think, well, yeah, I guess it was uncertain, but anyway. But the making a difference, that's where you get such an incredible feeling of achievement from that. And I guess the other thing in making a difference is the importance of perhaps being advocates. And advocacy is something that if you've got good data and you've got good information and you can actually make a difference, don't be frightened about going out and advocating for something that you feel is important for your society. The ethics, for example, that you might be interested in, Elise, in terms of the ethical aspects of, how agricultural research is done and funded and so on. So I guess what my sort of take-home messages are is always ask why. Don't ever assume that you know anything at all. Always ask why and try and find out what it is. You don't know everything. No one knows everything. And you don't want to be arrogant like that. Get the best data and do the best research that you can. Implement the findings. Don't be frightened about implementation. It's just so important to translate. But the last thing, and it came to me really when Elise was speaking, and that is get a mentor. Choose a mentor. Choose mentors. I didn't have mentors until quite late in my career. I now love being a mentor to young people. I adore it, because all I have to do is give of my knowledge, my wisdom, my networks to young people and help them along their path. And having a mentor is beneficial enormously, and I think Elise was very brave to tell us about the issues in relation to mental health. But mentors can help with all of those things, because mentors can share and support. And the only thing a mentor is for you is to be helpful to you. There's no other. I don't have any other agenda when I'm mentoring the young people I mentor. All I want them to have is everything I can give them. And it's a gorgeous thing. So don't be shy about seeking a mentor. You'd be amazed when you contact people. And Eva, you might have a program here at Murdoch. Probably you do. Everyone's nodding. Where in fact young people can be mentored. At times it's very hard for you when those risks you're taking and that uncertainty and when you want to make a difference, all the things we've been talking about. But having somebody who's been there and done it, even somebody who perhaps might not be that much older than you. You're going to be a mentor very soon, Elise. You already are. There you are. So I just want to, again, congratulate you all for getting your wonderful fellowships. I think Murdoch's doing a fantastic job with the George Alexander Fellowships, and that's why you're doing so well and getting so much of the support from the Ian Potter and the George Alexander Foundation. And thank you, Craig. I really am enjoying being on the Ian Potter Foundation Board of Governors, and hoping that we can do lots more good things together. Thank you very much.
Fiona, thank you for your great words. Thank you. Okay, it is now my pleasure, as I turn the page here, to present the 2019 Murdoch GAF Scholars with their certificates, and I believe we might have 6 of the 7 recipients here. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, great. So the first recipient is Tia Barard. That is for you. Congratulations. Thank you. Are we doing photographs? Sorry. Yeah. You get used to this, don't worry. Thank you. And that's yours as well. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Well done. Appreciate that. And then Pindavara Bully Turner, please. Congratulations, Pindavara. That's for you. Just face the camera. Great. That's yours as well. Thanks very much. Thank you. Maisie O'Reilly. That's for you. And if we face the camera. Oh, you've got it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And then Kayla Rowe. Congratulations. And that's for you. Just face the camera. Step forward. Thank you. And Ella Rulland.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
And then finally, Ruby Thorne. That's for you. Great. Thanks very much. Okay. And so finally, just to thank you all for coming and attending today, I think we now have refreshments to be served. I've been asked to add to the run sheet that group photos are going to be taken, and Nina, if you would please stand up for me. So Nina at the back there, who's standing up, is a member of the team from the George Alexander Foundation. She is going to direct people as to where you need to go to have your photos taken. Is that correct, Nina? Great, so do what Nina says, please. We would also encourage you to follow the GAF community on social media. So we have an Instagram account, we have a Twitter feed. What am I looking at here? Oh, fantastic. Okay, thank you. So there you go. They're all the relevant whatever the hell they are, social media tags. I'm not a social media person at all for a range of reasons. But we've actually invested quite a bit of time and technology in trying to really establish a GAF community platform that you guys will use and can plug into. And whilst you're a cohort of 7 this year, 6 of whom are here today, and I think 65 was the numbers mentioned before, since we've started awarding scholarships here at Murdoch, we have now in excess of 1,000 scholars or thereabouts nationally. We do award scholarships to 12 institutions plus 2 other institutions who are not tertiary institutions, and you can connect with some of those people, and you can do that through the social media platform. So please follow it. That'd be fantastic. Help yourself to refreshments and take the time to chat to Elise, chat to Fiona, chat to the members of the Murdoch staff that are here as well, and thank you again for coming. Thanks everybody.